Hey Lisa, I've been thinking lately about improving my English skills. I know you've been studying English for a while. Do you have any tips or methods that have worked well for you?
Oh, definitely. Learning English can be challenging, but it's really rewarding once you find a method that works for you. What's your current approach to studying English?
Well, I mostly just rely on textbooks and grammar exercises. I feel like I'm learning the rules, but when it comes to speaking or listening, I still struggle a lot. I get stuck, and sometimes I just don't know what to say.
That's pretty common. A lot of people focus too much on grammar at the beginning, which is important, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. One method that really helped me was incorporating more real-life listening practice. For example, I started watching TV shows, movies, and YouTube videos in English. Stuff that's entertaining, but also educational. It helps you hear how native speakers actually use the language in context.
That makes sense. I've heard people say that watching shows in English helps, but I always wonder, should I use subtitles, or should I try to go without them?
Great question. When you're just starting, using subtitles in your native language can be helpful because it helps you follow along. But as you progress, I'd recommend switching to English subtitles. That way, you're matching the spoken words to the written words, which strengthens your understanding. Eventually, try to watch without any subtitles at all. It's tough at first, but it really pushes your listening skills.
I see. I usually feel like I'm relying too much on the subtitles. I guess I need to start pushing myself a little more. What else do you do besides watching shows?
Well, another thing that made a big difference for me was practicing speaking as much as possible. I used language exchange apps to talk to native speakers. You don't have to aim for perfection, just getting used to expressing yourself in English is key. And if you make mistakes, that's totally fine. Mistakes are part of the learning process.
Yeah, I'm always worried about making mistakes. It's like I freeze up when I realize I might say something wrong.
Oh, I've been there. But here's the thing. Nobody expects you to speak perfectly when you're learning a new language. In fact, most people are really understanding and patient. The more you practice speaking, the more confident you become. It's really about building that comfort level.
You're right. I guess I just need to take that leap and start talking. Do you think recording myself speaking would help too?
Absolutely. Recording yourself is a fantastic way to improve. When you listen back, you can notice areas where you're strong and where you can improve. You'll also start to hear patterns in your speech, like if you're consistently mispronouncing certain words. It's like giving yourself feedback.
That sounds like a great idea. I've never really thought about that before. What about vocabulary? Sometimes I feel like I don't know enough words to really express myself well.
Expanding your vocabulary is important, but you don't have to learn thousands of new words at once. What I like to do is focus on learning words that are actually useful in everyday conversation. For example, pick up words related to your daily activities or topics you're interested in. And don't just memorize them, try to use them in sentences or when you're speaking. That way, they stick better.
Yeah, I think I've been trying to learn too many random words at once. I'll start focusing on practical vocabulary. Do you use any specific apps for vocabulary?
I do. I use apps like Anki and Memrise. They use spaced repetition, which means they show you words at intervals based on how well you know them. It's really effective because it helps you remember vocabulary long term. Have you tried any apps like that?
I've heard of them, but I haven't tried them yet. I'll give those a go. What about reading? Do you think reading in English helps too?
Definitely. Reading is one of the best ways to build your vocabulary and improve your grammar naturally. When you read, you're exposed to how sentences are structured and you see grammar in action. Plus, it's a great way to learn new words in context. I recommend starting with something that interests you, maybe short stories or articles online. Then, as you get more comfortable, you can move on to books or even news in English.
That's a good idea. I've always thought reading was too hard, but I think starting with short stories might be more manageable. Should I look up every word I don't understand?
Not necessarily. If you stop to look up every single word, it can slow you down and make reading frustrating. What I do is try to understand the general meaning of the sentence. If a word is really important to understanding the sentence, then I'll look it up. But if it's just a minor word, I'll skip it and move on. You'll find that a lot of times you can guess the meaning from the context.
That makes sense. I'll try that. Do you ever practice writing in English?
Yes. Writing is really important. It's a great way to reinforce what you've learned. When you write, you have more time to think about how to structure your sentences and use the new words you've learned. I used to keep a journal in English where I'd write about my day or my thoughts. It doesn't have to be perfect, just a way to practice forming sentences.
A journal? That's a cool idea. I could probably do that. Do you ever get feedback on your writing?
I do, actually. There are a lot of online communities where you can share your writing, and native speakers or other learners will give you feedback. I've used websites like Lang8 or HelloTalk for that. It's a great way to see where you can improve.
I should check those out. Getting feedback sounds helpful. What about grammar? You mentioned earlier that I shouldn't focus on it too much, but I feel like I still need to study it. What's your approach to grammar?
Grammar is important, but I think it's more effective to learn it in context rather than just memorizing rules. When you're reading, watching videos, or practicing conversations, pay attention to how grammar is used naturally. You can also study specific grammar points when you notice you're making a mistake consistently. For example, if you keep mixing up past tense and present tense, focus on that for a while until it becomes second nature.
So I should focus more on how grammar is used in real life rather than just drilling exercises.
Exactly. Of course, grammar exercises can help when you're starting out, but once you have a basic understanding, it's all about seeing how it's used in real-world situations. That's when it really clicks.
I've been doing it all wrong, focusing too much on the exercises and not enough on actual usage. I'm going to change that. Do you ever use flashcards for grammar?
I've tried that, but I found it more useful to practice grammar through speaking and writing. You can make some flashcards for tricky grammar points if you want, but try to practice in context as much as possible. The more you use the grammar in conversations, the more natural it becomes.
I see. I'll try to work it into my speaking and writing more. Speaking of writing, do you think learning formal writing is necessary, like essays or reports?
It depends on your goals. If you need to write formal documents for work or school, then yes, learning formal writing is important. But for everyday communication, informal writing is enough. If you're aiming for academic or business English, though, practicing essays or reports will definitely help.
I might need that eventually for work. I'll try to practice both, just to be safe. How often do you practice English, by the way?
I try to practice a little bit every day. It doesn't have to be hours at a time. Even just 15 or 30 minutes of listening, reading, or speaking can make a big difference. Consistency is more important than cramming for long sessions once a week.
That's encouraging. I usually feel overwhelmed thinking I need to spend hours every day to make progress.
You don't have to. Small regular practice is way more effective than overloading yourself. Plus, it keeps things fun and manageable. Have you thought about joining any English-speaking groups or clubs?
I haven't, but that sounds like a great idea. Do you know of any groups I could join?
There are tons of options online, especially on platforms like Meetup or Facebook. You can find groups where people practice English together, and some even focus on specific topics like business English or conversational English.
That sounds really useful. I'm going to look into that. It would be great to meet other